that were able to join us online. I think that this is, I don't want to put y'all on the spot, but I think this is our best attended event. So y'all are popular. Um, I just wanted to kick us off. I know I'm joined by some really amazing panelists, two folks here in person and two folks online. And so I want to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Tell us a little bit about your work at CDFA or in relation to CDFA, and a little bit of how you got to your current position. And I'll start with our folks online. Doria, do you mind getting us kicked off?
Sure, I'll do my best. So, hello everybody. I'm really honored to be here today. It's such an interesting time and an interesting time to be on a panel like this. So I'm Doria Robinson. I am the Executive Director of Urban Health. We're an urban agriculture organization based in Richmond, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, serving a low-income community of color, growing food in the city, operating a farm in the city, in a community that for years and years and years had very little access to fresh produce and healthy food. And so we're kind of dedicated to transforming that by actually growing the food and distributing it. I'm also a member of the CDFA board. I was the first urban agriculture member, first member to represent urban agriculture on the CDFA board, and have had, the again, the honor and privilege to serve in the capacity of helping to define regenerative agriculture for the state of California by kind of chairing the committee that was doing that work. And I now also serve on the Land Equity Task Force.
Thank you. And Doria brought the state board out to the farm a couple of years ago, and that was the first time that I got to see it, and it was absolutely amazing. So if you're ever in the area, definitely stop by. If it's open to the public, I might be sending, there we go. I was about to say, I might be sending an invite I can't make good on. All right. And so in the room, Kelvin, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, how you got here?
Good afternoon. My name is Kelvin Kimball. I am the Health and Safety Officer for the Animal Health Division within CDFA. What brought me here is just pretty much safety. One of the things that I really enjoy is educating not only the staff members, but also individuals about safety and the importance of being safe in what you're doing. I got my master's in occupational health and safety. I came over from CDPH, where I was in the informatics branch, worked with the wildfires there. But what really attracted me over here was it was more of a hands-on approach with the administration, with CDFA, and making sure that everyone understood the importance and making sure everyone is safe when they're at work.
And we're much cooler, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, there it is.
Much more friendlier.
All right, and we'll go back to online. Rolston, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. To begin with, I also serve with Doria on the State Board of Ag. I'm probably one of the newest additions to the board, so I'm delighted to serve with her, and they've done some amazing work over the past several years. So that's my connection to CDFA. But I serve as the Dean of Agriculture at Fresno State. It's been 2 years into my tenure as the Dean of Ag. And for those of you who are not very familiar with the College of Ag, it really consists of 4 main pieces to it. One of which, well, the first piece is our philanthropic arm, which is very unusual for a College of Ag. It's a separate 501c organization called Ag One. That's the first piece. We do have the second piece, which would be our academic departments. There are 6 different academic departments, and they range anywhere from animal sciences and ag ed to viticulture and enology. And some of them have really storied history. For example, a viticulture and enology program was the first program in the United States to have a bonded winery on its campus. So just an interesting fact. So we're known for for our wines and of course our ice creams as well. But that will be for another day as a conversation. The third piece is our research centers, of which we have 4 major ones, inclusive our Center for Irrigation Technology that served California for a long time, serves as a space where the longest testing program for agricultural pumps has been going in the state. And then the fourth piece is our Fresno State Farm, which is relatively large. It's about 1,000 acres, and it's contiguous, which means to say you can walk across it as one block, which is unusual. So it's a very big farm. So those 4 pieces fall under the purview of the Dean of Ag. So that makes it for a very complex organization that falls in my portfolio. And prior to that, I was on faculty at New Mexico State University, joined the faculty as an assistant professor and rose through the ranks, eventually becoming a Regents professor, which is the highest rank at the institution, and then leading the Plant and Environmental Sciences and their Extension Sciences department, which gave me statewide responsibilities. So that's in a nutshell my role and what I've done so far. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's amazing. And I'm just so excited to have 2 state board members here today. So I think 10 years overrated. I'm excited that you're both here, even if you're the newest member. All right. And finally, I want to introduce the last member of our panel. Anissa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Anissa Kotey. I'm a staff services manager with the Human Resources branch. I have been with CDFA for about 10 months, but I have been working for the state coming on 10 years in September. So in those 10 years, all of my experience has been in HR, specifically in labor relations, so dealing with unions and negotiations for contracts and those sorts of things, and grievances, and also performance management. In my current role at CDFA, I am the manager in the performance management unit. So that basically just involves consulting with supervisors and managers on the progressive discipline process that we have in civil service, and helping managers and supervisors manage, performance related concerns with their staff. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thanks.
And you also came to CDFA because we're cooler. Yeah, okay, I figured. All right. So really getting into the meat of the conversation, I wanted to start off and really, we'll start with you, Kelvin, if that's all right, really understand kind of what does Black History Month mean to you personally?
Black History Month, for me, it takes a deeper meaning, because I'm originally from Georgia. My parents were born in, my mother was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and my dad was born in Covington, Georgia. As I also attended HBCU, Historically Black College and University. I went to Clark Atlanta University. My father went to Morehouse College. So growing up in those 2 states, you really get a sense of identity, and you get a sense of understanding what importance Black history is. My dad is a minister, Reverend Thomas Kimball. He marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, Reverend Jesse Jackson. He participated in the 60s with a lot of the protests. So, that was instilled with us. My mom was born in Birmingham, Alabama, where she grew up. And one of the biggest thing in histories that happened was the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, which is the church that my mother attended, and where the 4 girls that were killed was her friends. So, looking at that and knowing that, it gives you a sense of identity, and as well as what really impressed me is my mom in the 60s became a stewardess. And for African Americans in the 60s in the segregated South was very difficult to get this kind of job. She was the first African American to fly with Southern Airways which was really impressive. And it was kind of, just the stories that she told going from city to city, where there was times where she couldn't even get off the plane because of segregation. And so it really hits home, being able to understand, what our community has given to the world and what my parents have, laid down a foundation for me to succeed. So for me, it really, really reaches home. With social media now, I try to post on my feeds 28 days of history coming from the African American community. And not just within America, but all around the world, so that people can see the contributions that African Americans or Black Americans or Africans have made throughout history. So thanks.
Thank you. 28 days is not enough. You need more time. We'll continue with the room and then go to the folks online. Anissa?
So I have a little bit of a different experience in my identity. So I actually I was born in California, but I grew up in California, in London and in Accra, Ghana, so across 3 different continents, essentially. So my experience of Blackness has differed, like, depending on where I was at, because every country, every continent, experiences Blackness differently or even defines Blackness differently. So for me, Black History Month is, learning about the contributions of African Americans and Black people in this country, and, you know, not just their contributions, but the significance they have in history, because Black history is American history. And oftentimes those are stories that are untold. So learning that this time of month, not just in February, but throughout, the year, it is important. And a big part for me is also recognizing the intersection of the Black American experience and how it relates to the diaspora as a whole, because we are very a diverse group of people. As you know, even in America now, it's not just African Americans, but people of Caribbean descent, African descent, Afro-Latina and Afro-Latino descent. So just constantly learning and recognizing the sacrifices people have made in the past that have given us our, civil rights that we have now and the luxuries we have now, not just for Black people in America, but for every single person, because we all benefit from those sacrifices. So.
Absolutely. Thank
Yeah.
you. And speaking to our panelists online, how about y'all? What does Black History Month mean to you personally? We can start with Rolston, if that's okay.
That's all right. Yes, so kudos to what the speaker just said before me, and I concur with that. But when I look at Black history, I also look at the collective contributions of Black folks in the scientific and agricultural space. And some of those achievements have been unheralded. They are not well known. So that's one of the things about Black History Month that's really, really meaningful to me, and which I really take personal. And I'll use the example of the agricultural space, which is the area I'm most familiar with, is that we've contributed quite a bit, and yet a lot of people do not know of our contributions. So for me, for Black History Month, this is what I feel should be out in the public space. What are the contributions that Black folks have made to the scientific world, to the agricultural community? So I graduated from Iowa State University, and in 1998, I'll just put the date out there. And when I walked through the campus of Iowa State, I would walk by Carver Hall in the Midwest, and here's Carver Hall right smack in the middle. of campus on my way to Horticulture Hall, which was where I spent most of my time. And we know of the story of George Washington Carver in the agricultural space. It's a very well-known story. He was the first Black student, first Black graduate student at Iowa State. He was also the first faculty member. He was also the first graduate student at Iowa State, more than 100 years ago. And of course, Carver wrote at Tuskegee, which we know of. And we like the contributions that Dr. Carver had made in terms of peanuts and peanut growth and those sorts of things. But if we look back and see George Washington's Carver to agriculture, he really was one of the pioneers in what we would consider to be regenerative agriculture these days, because this whole idea of working with peanuts was that peanuts would be used as a soil amendment, as he was looking for an alternative to cotton, which cotton depletes the soil and peanuts fix nitrogen and they put it back into the soil. So some of the things that the new movement we talk about, like in regenerative ag, Black folks really started that more than 100 years ago. And so these are some of the things that as a scientist, as I look at, like, some Black folks did some amazing things and they were the pioneers in spaces, but we do not always hear about those things. So for me, as Black History Month rolls around, I'd like to see a little bit more tidbits or snippets of that kind of information being out there. Not just, okay, for example, Dr. Carver worked on peanuts, but hey, what's the broader story? What was the principle behind him working on peanuts? It was really not just peanuts for peanuts' sake. It was really for regenerative ag. And it's very fitting because, and Doria knows this, I joined the board just a few months ago, and CDFA had been working for the past 2 years on crafting the language for what regenerative agriculture means. But lost in all of this was the pioneer behind all of this from 100 years ago. Here we go. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Doria?
Yeah. Okay, I have to just say that I love that. Thank you, Robin. I love that. Yes. That just made my Black History Month. So just to add to that, my experience of Black History Month has been this 28 days, the shortest month, sadly, where I honestly just reflect on 11 months of inundation with negative images of who Black people are and how we don't contribute and how we're a draw and negative on society and on the world. And then we get these 28 days where we get positive stories about Black people in the media and in organizations and whatnot. And so, it definitely, it's a time to reflect on that dynamic, on that dynamic. I think that, normally during this time, kind of what Rolston was kind of pointing out, we get a lot of stereotypical stories like about, kind of surface level, Dr. Carver, he was into peanuts, but not the understory, the way that something was revolutionary or how it started a movement or how it made, critical changes to culture or science or anything. It's just the surface level. And I reflect on that during this time, especially now as I'm an adult. And I think more and more, I'm also reflecting on this kind collective cultural amnesia that we kind of have. How can we share all of these wonderful stories, all of the stories of, NASA engineers and mathematicians and people who are creating things in science and creating things as farmers and whatever, and then just forget when it comes March 1st. It's like that just fades from the cultural consciousness. And it makes me think that we just have so much more work to do to make sure that more complex stories of all of our contributions are being shared every day of the year, every month of the year, and that we have to kind of heal this collective amnesia so that we carry these stories as American stories every day.
Thank you. That's really important to remember because this certainly doesn't end in, I don't even know what day it is these days, but it certainly doesn't end in 18 days. We'll stay, if it's all right, with the theme of talking to the folks online. And I know, Rolston, you got us started with Dr. Carver. So feel free to just elaborate on that one or add to it. But what are the aspects of Black History Month that you think are most important to honor within the context of the agricultural and scientific fields that we work in? What are some of those stories, kind of as Doria mentioned, that we want to highlight? Oh, we're muted.
Sorry. Sorry.
And just, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty in the audience, so I just want to make sure, can we all hear the folks that are online now? Awesome,
Yes.
we're good. Go
Okay.
for it.
So I'll continue with Dr. Carver's story in one way. When I arrived on the campus at Iowa State, we had a sort of a vibrant Black community, meaning that the students who of color, we got together as a group, and we were small. It was a small group in that Midwestern university. We know the storied history of Iowa State and what it has contributed to agriculture, and Iowa, of course, being one of the more larger agricultural producing states. But what was informative for us was that at that time, the university, when we were in the late 90s, was celebrating essentially a year of Dr. Carver's legacy at the institution. And in addition to we celebrating his achievements, we got to see or hear about some of his other contributions and how one pioneer had this multiplier effect. In other words, for me, it's not only what is immediate, but also the fields that we've broken up, we sort of let loose, if you will, the new emerging fields that we have pioneered, and more importantly, the wide reach of what all Black folks have done. So just keeping in the theme with Washington Carver, what may not be known, for example, is Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace became the Secretary of Ag of the United States. And Henry Wallace was a very famous plant geneticist, done an amazing thing. What is probably lesser known is that Henry Wallace someone studied with him, but he really studied under him in terms of George Washington Carver coaching and working with someone who eventually became the Secretary of Ag of the United States and then shaped agriculture for a long, long time. So these are the stories that, for me, I'd like to see highlighted, not only the immediate contribution of one individual, but also the fields that, in Ag is an example, that they have also trained individuals, caused the field to be an emerging field, and also having a lasting impact on the legacy of Ag. And so in California, when I look at the landscape of agriculture, and I look at the African-American farmers, and I certainly am well plugged into that organization. Here, at least in the Fresno area, I meet with the local chapter president very frequently and just talk about some of the challenges of small, underserved, and Black farmers. And, the statistics are sometimes sobering. In California, for example, there are only maybe a little over 500 Black farmers in the state of California. And so for me, the aspects of Black history I'd like to embrace is that we want to say that this 500 farmers have had a legacy of ensuring that some of these smaller pieces of ag that do not get a lot of attention, niche crops, specialty crops that we would normally not get in the supermarket were it not for some of our small and indigenous farmers and underserved groups, promoting and having in the industry or in the ag industry, we would not have some of those crops were it not for these farmers, for example. So if you look at a Black farmer and you say, what crops would you grow? Well, I'm certainly not going to think about the traditional almonds and corn that we find really, encouraging, or I call it delectable here in the region. But they'll tell you, well, let's talk about Black beans. Let's talk about okra and crops that enriches our culture. Crops that, of course, create that diversity of nutrition or diversity of just, a palate for us here in California. So to close, what I would say is that what I'd like to see and what it really means to me is that we need to have our Black farmers being given the proper respect in terms of what they contribute to basically enriching that whole ecosystem of agriculture.
Absolutely. Doria, it's a hard act to follow. I know I keep, but how about you?
I'm
What
gonna,
are the aspects of Black History Month you want to
Yeah.
honor kind of in that context?
yeah, I'm gonna try to just be brief, and I would say I would absolutely love to have a deep dive into the historical contributions of enslaved Africans to the agricultural practices of the US, specifically a deep dive into the role that West Africans had in bringing rice and rice cultivation practices to the United States. They were absolutely key. They were not unskilled labor. Many of them came, were stolen, kidnapped, brought here, but they brought the cultivation of rice and all of the wealth that came with that development of that cash crop of the Carolina gold to the United States. And I don't think that people really understand or know that story. They don't know the role that people played, that African peoples played in the development of really the wealth of the country, especially when it comes to, developing the agricultural skills and practices to make rice cultivation successful in the United States. I think just having that story clearly told and grounded in fact in history, and giving, kind of honoring the folks that contributed to that would be epic.
Absolutely. All right, I'll shift to the room. How about Anissa?
Yeah, so my thoughts on that are obviously along the lines of what has been shared already, is highlighting the contributions not only during enslavement times or times where African Americans were sharecroppers in this country in the present day, but taking it a step further and highlighting, recognizing it, but also recognizing the inequities that have existed and the, discrimination that, people have faced and how to remedy that. Um, I know we have like racial equity and social equity and EJ, environmental justice, but I think those are all great programs that not only CDFA, but all state agencies need to adopt and make sure that when they're making decisions, they're looking at it with that lens on, right? In hopes of trying to not rewrite, but essentially correct the wrongs that have been done in the past. So to me, those are like important things, not just highlighting it, but also coming up with a plan to move forward to make sure that the like the level, field is equal eventually.
Absolutely. Kelvin, anything to add? I know that when you're the last person, it's.
I know it's always hard. For me, what I like to see is, like everyone says, it's just more contribution and to acknowledge what has taken place, what African Americans or Blacks have done throughout civilization. A great example I look at my field in health and safety. Inventor by the name of Garrett Morgan. A little known fact is that he was the one who helped create the refrigerated truck. So when we go to agriculture, he was the one who figured out how to keep the food cold, to make it be more transportable from state to state, which is in practice still to this day. Another invention that he created was the gas mask. I am a respiratory fit person for CDFA for fitting staff. And in his creation, there was an incident where there was a cave-in where he created the gas mask to save construction workers. From that invention, it was actually used not only to save them, but it was also used in World War II to, with gas masks there. He died having 61 patents under his name. His contribution, even with, once again, with the refrigerated truck, helped with blood bank donations because of the fact that they were able to transport blood. So things like that, a lot of people see what's happening or they see it, but they don't really understand the knowledge that African Americans have contributed to society. Just to focus on things like that, that's what really, really, what I think would be something that CDFA could do to really helps that part to stand out.
Thank you. Certainly inventions that we benefit from every day. All right, so kind of building on kind of what we can do year round, because as we've all acknowledged, 28 days, not enough days. So kind of as a follow-up, are any of these aspects, actions, or initiatives that CDFA could pursue to kind of continue to honor Black History Month and support Black employees year round?
Yeah, I think having conversations like these and opportunities like this in the workplace is important, right? So that, we could all learn and share our experiences and thoughts and recommendations. So that's a great start. I think then, also taking the information from forums like this and trying to implement and make changes, where we can is also important. Because sometimes, we will talk about the issues or space will be made, but nothing comes out of it. Exactly. So the next steps is just trying to, implement changes. And I think also having strategic partnerships with people in the communities, with universities that serve those communities, so African American communities, is important in advising and consulting, like in decision making, understanding that we are a government agency and sometimes there are challenges with that. But collaborating with those sorts of organizations and institutions to try to make change and you know, um, like just recognize the history and the contributions of African Americans. And like you said, it's not just keeping it surface level, but actually going deeper and recognizing the impact of those contributions and how that relates to our daily lives. So yeah, I think we're like on, this is a good step and we're on the right track.
Thank you. Thanks. And we'll keep moving. There'll be a next step. So we'll stay in the room.
Just to echo what she was saying, I think it's just recognizing the contributions and making a conscious effort to do that. A lot of times it becomes a second thought or another priority comes up, but I don't think people really understand what it's like not to know your history. And it's kind of hard when you have kids and they're growing up and you want to share the stuff with them, but you really don't know your own history to share. Like African Americans, many that are here, the history can only go back so far. Where other ethnicity groups, they can go back for hundreds and hundreds of years. Whereas we are probably the only, ethnic group you can say that we're like born of America. We weren't here when it was discovered. We weren't here, it's all these things, but we were actually born of America. You have being brought in from Africa with many different people, with many different languages, and adapting to one language, learning everyone's language, learning the patterns, learning how their agriculture affect from one area to the other area. I think that's one thing that CDFA could really focus on, is just really making it more of a priority for people to know the history of.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll ask our state board members the same question. Doria, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure, I'll try to be brief too. I think that CDFA has the power to share story, and to share these stories year round, and to share the stories of the kind of innovators that we've been talking about, and share those deeper stories on media channels and communications and highlights. And that just could be something that just gets done and kind of institutionalized. I think we could also highlight contemporary farmers so that people don't think that Black farmers are a thing of the past. This is a thing that happens now. It's not a thing anymore. You know, so that people know that there are Black farmers. There is a Black Farming Association, that this we are current, you know, on the land, and have contributions that we're making. I think finally, the last thing that I wanted to say is that there's a profound opportunity that CDFA staff and kind of leadership can play in this moment. When we're learning about history during this month, or whenever we're learning about history, we can ask critical questions to understand the mechanisms that perpetrated wrongs, and then look at our current practices and see, are these mechanisms at play? Can we change structures so that we can root out the things that isolate, the things that create inequity in our systems? Can we root those things out? Can we learn? Can we honestly not just hear the past, but learn from it and then act differently? And I feel like that is a charge I would love to, you know, ask every member of CDSA staff to take, is to learn the deeper stories, and to see how can I apply the learning that I get from those stories to my current practice, so that I do not repeat the mistakes of the past.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Uh,
Rolston?
Yes, that's well said, Doria. Great. How can we not repeat some of the mistakes that were made? I have two thoughts on that. One is picking up with what Doria just mentioned, looking at our contemporary farmers and what they're doing and what they're currently doing. I think that's an important space for us to identify currently. Sure, we could look back historically and see what was done, but there are farmers, Black farmers in the space now that are doing amazing things. I just heard about the invention of the refrigerated truck. And there are farmers right now, I know, in the Central Valley area looking to set up small companies that can help have refrigerated trucks so that the farmers can get their produce transported from the Central Valley into the San Francisco region, for example. And I didn't know, for example, that a Black person was the one who actually started that. So there's the connections that we need to make. And we need to let the our contemporary peers know about those sorts of things. The other thing I believe also, even if I'm partial to ag, there are amazing stories of contemporary scientists now, the Black scientists that are doing amazing work. And I'm a little, I got a front seat to this, and I don't know if it's appropriate to bring that up here in this forum, but I was talking to a cousin of mine I grew up with from about 30 years ago, and so what do you do now? Says, well, she worked for Novo Nordisk. Novo Nordisk is a company that makes insulin. She was one of their product managers. And then you also know about the Ozempic movement right now. And then I said, what did you do? So, well, I was part of that big team that worked on the technologies to develop Ozempic. I'm like, oh my gosh, here's that work. I didn't even know Phaedra. And she's my cousin. I grew up with her. She's a chemist, really. And now she's founded her own company. She is, founded a Professional Women of Color organization, travels the world, does all these amazing things. And here am I, I knew she was good, but I didn't realize this. You've done these amazing things. And so 2 years ago, her husband, which won the Nobel Prize in chemistry, I'm like, oh my gosh. Those are some of the things that, that I'm like, this is big. And, but you wouldn't know, you wouldn't hear a lot about it. So this one of the things, the folks that are doing contemporary things. The other piece is we also, as those of us on the panel, those of us in the audience, we're also doing amazing things, and sometimes we're a little shy to let people know what the kind of amazing work that we are also doing to move in the ag space. So that's one of the other areas I think we can also highlight. What is our own stories in that contemporary space and what it can contribute. I think it just helps dispels the myth that we are the followers or not innovators. So we're doing amazing things. We ought to do that. The second point is that what CDFA staff can do would be to help identify the spaces where it makes sense for us to make strategic investments. I think that's going to become important. And in the ag space, I think areas like agricultural technologies would be one area where we can put technologies that make sense into the hands of all Black farmers. And technology that makes sense. So we know in the large farms, the adoption rate of technologies is much higher than on our small farms. And people say, but why is this? Well, technologies that are appropriate for the very large farms are not necessarily appropriate for the small farms. And so if we can find technologies, people working in the space, finding technologies that make sense for small farmers, particularly in the ag space, we're going to have a lot more people, small farmers in this case, working in the ag space. So that's one thing I believe CDFA can help with. And that would involve, not only those on the board, but all the subcommittees and all the technical experts that are on there. And of course, continue to provide a technical support or financial support in an era where it's at the federal level, it may become even more challenging. So we at the state level need to be doing our part to ensure that we have a vibrant Black farmer community. So those are the 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. I knew that you had agronomy covered, but I didn't know that if I ever needed a chemist, I just reach out. We'll stay on the screen for just another moment. Our last question is really, what's one thing you're invested in and or looking forward to in your work at CDFA over the next year? What I heard, I don't know if everyone in the audience heard this, but I heard that Doria is really excited to be profiled as one of our contemporary Black farming leaders. Okay. Well, I'll let her answer for herself.
Yeah, just quickly, not, I don't want to be profiled, but I would love to hear about other folks, other farmers. But I'm really proud of the work that we're doing on the Land Equity Task Force. I think that the recommendations that we hope to be bringing forward later on this year regarding, increasing avenues to access to land for disadvantaged farmers and tribal communities, can really make moves and create a lot more access for people to be on the land and to, be growers, be farmers, and to care for the land if they're a tribal community. So I'm looking forward to those recommendations coming out. I'm actually about to jump on a plane to meet everybody in Coachella to do another session over the next couple of days to try to move those recommendations forward. So that work I think is critical and really good work, and I hope the state does great things with it.
Thank you. And Rolston?
So I'm a relative neophyte to the board, and but I do have some expertise that I hope at some point will be mine, and I can help contribute to the advancement of the board policies and principles, or help, for example, where there's some regulatory matters that I need to weigh in using my particular expertise. I'm particularly interested in water and all the facets of it. And so I know at some point, well, the CDFA that will be a topic that has to be addressed at some point. We do have some other regulations in the state, for example, Sigma is one of them that we have to make some contributions on. So I hope at some point I can bring that expertise that I have in water, for example, to help us make some sensible and friendly, I call it, friendly regulations around the topic of water, which is broad, it's a broad topic. When you talk about water, there's several aspects to it. So hopefully I can contribute to that. I've had a front seat in the first couple of meetings as to how the process works in terms of crafting definitions, and it's a very holistic and inclusive approach. Doria just mentioned that there's several committees that meet and take input from the public, several subcommittees. So at some point, I hope I'll be a part of those subcommittees that can help craft meaningful regulation that we can make recommendations.
Thank you. Y'all only want to weigh in on the really simple topics like water and regenerative ag, land access. All right, so I will move to our folks in the room. Who'd like to go first?
I'll go first. So, as I mentioned earlier, I am newer to CDFA. I've only been with CDFA for 10 months. And I also work in HR, so I'm not really involved in like the technical work or the science part of it. So what I do look forward to in being here is continuing to learn, and I do agree CDFA could be the voice in sharing those stories, and for people like me that are not so involved in the details of what we actually do, or the scientific and agriculture stuff, just learning, attending forums like this, and also sharing what I learned with my community to pass it on. So that's what I look forward to with CDFA.
Thank you. I think that only HR is a misnomer. I mean, I think that we can all agree that our admin services are pretty essential. All right, close us out, and then hopefully we might have a time for a question or two.
One thing that I look forward to is really learning more about CDFA, my role, the importance of my role. I think I know a lot of people say this, but I really, really love my job. I love educating people about safety. I love educating people about CDFA. And I think that CDFA does a great job, especially with the animal health division, especially what's going on now with the H5N1. I was talking about it earlier where, people were asking, well, how is it going? I think, CDFA did and is doing an amazing job. As big as the state is, controlling what has happened and, steering everyone in the right direction to really, really condense the situation. It's just amazing when you look at it. I was with CDPH when when the outbreak happened. So looking at that situation versus what's going on now, it just blows my mind. So I'm really thankful, and I really look forward in that aspect. And then just sharing, my lived experiences with people as well.
Thank you. Yes, there's kudos to everyone in animal health right now, because I don't know how y'all are on your feet. It's a pretty big undertaking. All right, so that's the last of my questions, but I know I'm not the only one, so I'll open it up to folks that are either online or in the room if you have questions for the panel. Maybe just one.
If you're in the room, just raise your hand. Dee has a microphone and he'll bring it. Hank's got one up here, Dee. And then you just got to push the button on the bottom there.
Hi, thank you. Over the last century, or most of it, Black farmers have been excluded from benefits that have been passed by the federal government, such as subsidies and loans. Do you see this changing, or has it changed? Thank you.
Thank you. Folks on the, I don't know if our state board members want to weigh in. Any thoughts?
I can.
Okay.
I can go.
Yeah.
Do I see it changing? That's kind of a loaded question, especially in today's situation where there's a lot of things that are being taken away from not just the Black community, but other marginalized communities. Do I see it changing? Not for a while. I'm hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. But I think that as a collective, if people were to come together, then we could have a much more positive impact on what's happening. Thanks.
Thank you. And I might open it up too. I know, Doria, not to put you on the spot, but we were talking about land access and all of the barriers, not just the kind of access to federal capital. If you want to expand on that a little bit, if you can. I don't know. It might be a closed subject right now with the.
No, I mean it's a broad subject, right? We're discovering through our research, through the work of all of the different subcommittees, that there are many ways, some very clear and overt, like federal policies that made it really difficult for Black farmers to get access to the same resources that white farmers had. But also just in the structure of programs, language of programs, the lack of access, the promises for certain types of support, and then the difference between how that support actually gets delivered on the ground. There's so many different ways that barriers and boundaries are put in place, making it more difficult for underserved farmers, all underserved farmers and all disadvantaged farmers, not just African-American farmers, have had difficulty accessing land or other resources like capital. There's also a lack of understanding of all the things that folks really need in order to, not just attain land, not just to secure land, but to get a business off the ground and, put in all of the other kind of post-purchase resources and expertise that you need in order to really launch that business with all of the infrastructure and other needs. So our job is to try to look at it as a holistic puzzle and to look for opportunities that the state has to make adjustments in existing programs and work, so we can remove some of those barriers, correct some of those, oversights, and some of those outright wrongs. Unfortunately, we're not in a national climate where people are willing to walk that road, but we are in Black History Month, so I get to say a quote that the arc of the moral universe is long and it bends towards justice. So you just keep pushing and keep hoping that people keep their eyes and hearts open.
Great. If I may add, part of my role on the board is to also link with the other CSU systems, the other deans in ag. So that's part of my role. So I can also speak to what we are doing at Fresno State in terms of ensuring there's better equity in terms of the distribution and access to resources. I can address that. We've onboarded in my unit 2 major federal grants from a couple of years ago that sort of strikes at the heart of addressing those inequities. So for example, there's a veteran farmers program that we have a whole team working on. And as Doria mentioned, how do you gain access to FSA services, for example? And then we have a team working on putting that information out there. In fact, we have a website up that tells the beginning farmers and ranchers, how do you access that information? How do you get a farm ID? How do you approach capital? These are sort of fundamental questions. And we have a team here on the Fresno State campus helping the farmers here in the Valley to do this. That's one grant. So personally, I'm involved in making sure that happens. The other grant that we've onboarded, and I currently serve as the principal investigator on that grant. If you recall, during the pandemic, people ran out of food. There were dislocations in the supply chain. And so if you recall, the Biden administration then had put out a call to establish these food centers. It was about $400 million to ensure that there were not these dislocations in our food supply. And they made those grants available, and 12 of those centers were established throughout the United States. California, fortunately, was one of them. And UCANR was sort of the PI on this grant. We were awarded $35 million to ensure that small and underserved farmers, have access to the markets, that the supply chain is robust. And we're part of that whole ecosystem. And here at Fresno State, we're working with our underserved farmers in the community. One of the things we plan to do is what we are doing currently is to have workshops on, if you have a small product, how do you make sure it's safe to be scaled up, to be sold? So we have what's called HACCP certification for them. the farmers also want to have a robust Black farmers market. So working with our team to find ways in which you can develop a feasibility plan to develop a robust farmers market. So individually, we're doing those things here in our college. But yes, access to equity still remains a fundamental challenge. But from the previous administration, I saw firsthand that Secretary Vilsack, I've been to some of his sessions where they talked about addressing this issue. And about a year and a half ago, we had at that time the administrator of FSA was visiting the area as well to talk about some of the ways in which we need to have more, need the underserved farmers to have better access to capital and so forth.
Thank you. It's certainly daunting to see kind of like holistically how many pieces there are to this puzzle to kind of one simple question or goal, but it means there's plenty of work to be done no matter, and we'll just keep chipping away. And so thank you for your leadership on that, and thank you for addressing it. All right. Do we have, I think we might be, well, we have time for one more question. Good. Are there any other questions in the room? Do we want to look at the chat?
Nothing from the chat right now.
Oh, we got a couple more in the room, so just one more.
Is there anything that you could specifically say about Black History Month that you would want people to take away from it? Maybe every year, or would it be something new every year that you would want people to take away from it? So when we walk out today, what would you want us to know?
That's a wonderful question to end on. I'm seeing thinking faces, and I did pick on our board members first last time, so I will pick on the folks in the room. Anissa, Kelvin, what are your thoughts? What's one thing? It's hard to narrow it down.
I think this is along the lines of what we've all shared. I think if you can make it like a personal goal or something every year if you learn something new, right? So not just a surface level of the same old, like few people that we always recognize during Black history, but, whether that's in agriculture or science or something that you're interested in, is just learning about someone and doing like a deep dive into their contributions, and how those contributions affect us in our day-to-day life. So that's something I try to do. It's always like, okay, like, who do I know? And sometimes those people could be, if you're lucky enough to have someone personally, right, like in your family history or something like that, or a friend's family history, or just, just Googling. Social media has a lot of information. Obviously, make sure we vet that, the sources. But I would say that's like one takeaway, and that's something I try to do.
I think for me is for people to take, making a priority. You have 12 months in a year, learn 12 people within that year. Focus on that. You don't want to overwhelm yourself, but like you say, vet the information, know what's happening, what is the story behind the story. A great example is that, everyone knows the Long Ranger, but does everyone know that Bass Reeves was the inspiration for the Long Ranger, and he was African-American that, was one of the top marshals on the West and arrested over 40,000 individuals single-handedly. So things like that, you take it, you learn it, and, vet the information and just really make it a priority behind everything. Thanks.
Thank you. I will turn it over to our state board members to close us out for kind of what your one takeaway would be, or what you would hope folks would take away from Black History Month.
I'll jump in really quick. I just want to kind of check mark repeat that, yeah, please do go beyond the surface story. Really embrace the beautiful complexity of our diversity and the complexity of our stories. And finally, apply what you learn. The fun facts and trivia is all great, But, you know, it's really in the application of what we learn from these stories that help us collectively create the world that we all deserve and the world that I hope we all want.
Oh, we're muted. Sorry, make you go back.
For me, I'll restrict my answer to the ag space, that we cannot just rely on the 10 crops or so that produces most of the food in the world. And that all farmers, everyone in the ecosystem of ag needs to contribute. And we need to have that story told, that everyone can contribute to ag, not just a few.
Thank you. Those are wonderful, wonderful words to end on. Thank you to our panelists. It's been an honor to sit up here with you, and thank you for letting me pepper you with questions. And thank you to everyone who was able to attend in person and online. Like I said, this is definitely one of, if not our best attended event. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day and a great rest of Black History Month.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. Doria, safe travels. Rolston, thank you for being here. Panelists, Anissa, Kelvin, thank you for being here. I want to invite everybody back to our bistro for some refreshments from Maestro Cafe, a Black-owned business here in Sacramento. So please join us if you have time. I know you all have to get back to work.
Rolston, we'll just send you some.
Yeah.
We'll mail it.
All right. I look
Thank
forward
you,
to it.
everybody, for
Thank you
being
all.
here.
Okay, bye-bye.